Jack from Salt Lake City, he said, hey, what are some of the biggest butterfly effect moments in college football history? Like, if something happened differently, it would have changed the entire sport. These happen all around us every day. Butterfly Effect, also a very underrated movie. Ashton Kutcher, I believe Amy Smart in that movie. Yeah, pretty deep though, but good movie. I think back to Michigan in 2020. I think back to Jim Harbaugh being on the hot seat. During the COVID year, remember, a lot of Michigan folks wanted him fired. They got to the end of the year, they canceled the Ohio State game, remember. I'm still convinced if they play that game, they get drugged and Jim Harbaugh gets fired. I think that would have happened, but it didn't, and he didn't. And it's a good thing, I think, for Michigan that he didn't, pending investigation outcomes, because in years 2021, 22, and 23, he beat Ohio State. In 2023, they won the national title. They had back-to-back-to-back Big Ten titles. It's a great what if, because if they would have dumped him, first off, we don't know where Michigan would have turned. Secondly, we don't know if the current scandal they're being investigated for would have existed. So, there's a plus and a minus side there. But I think it all stems back from that Ohio State-Michigan game that never happened. Buckeye fans will forever tell you they intentionally ducked the game. And I don't know that they're wrong. I have no firsthand knowledge of that. Makes sense to me, though. I kind of bought into that way of thinking. I don't think Michigan wanted anything to do with that game that year. Now, two things could be true. They could have not wanted to play the game and also had valid reasons not to play the game. I don't know. I do also not fully know if they would have lost by 30, would Harbaugh have been fired. What I do know is they didn't play the game. He didn't get fired. They restructured his contract, and they proceeded to go on a run. And it culminated, scandal notwithstanding, in one of the best stories in college football. But see, here's the thing about it. It's getting harder and harder by the day to block the scandal out, because it's becoming more and more by the day an integral part of telling that story, which I hate, because it's a good story. I mean, if you think about it at the root of it, it's a bunch of guys who got recruited to a program, staying with the same program, sticking it out, and ultimately having it culminate with a national championship win. That's the way I love for this sport to work. It's just that there may have been some other things in the background that weren't the way the sport was supposed to be working. But that's a what if. This has got a Michigan tie as well. I think about Rich Rodriguez. What if Rich Rod never leaves West Virginia? If you're 18 years old, if you're one of my college viewers and listeners, I don't know that you know how incredible West Virginia was. They were running the Big East for a while. Also, side note, do you know what the Big East was in football? Or a generation before that, do you have any idea how good the Big East was in basketball? But Rich Rod's at West Virginia. Let's see. They had double-digit win seasons in 05, 06, and 07. Before the 07 season, he took the Alabama job for like 30 seconds and then backed out of it. And some dude who was the head coach of the Dolphins ended up taking the job. I forget how that worked out for Alabama. But Rich Rod stays at West Virginia, coaches one more year. They win their usual double-digit amounts of games, 10, I think. They won a share of the Big East title that year. And then he goes to Michigan. And it sucked. It didn't work. It was the craziest thing because he didn't fit there, and most Michigan folks didn't want him there. Mind-boggling how that worked out. And so he ended up wandering through the college football desert. He was at Arizona. He was a coordinator at Ole Miss. He went to Hawaii, maybe to coach, maybe to just vacation. He ended up at ULM, head coach at Jacksonville State, and now guess where he is? He's right back at West Virginia. It's just that now he's trying to rebuild West Virginia. What would West Virginia have been if Rich Rod never left? That's why it's a great what if. Follow-up what if. What if he did leave West Virginia, but he took the Bama job? Where, I don't know, I presume it wouldn't have gone much better than it went at Michigan for him, but I can't prove that. You can't prove a counterfactual, but what I can prove to you is if he takes the job there in 07, Nick Saban's not taking the job. That's the guy's name, Nick Saban. That's who ended up taking the job. So does Saban stay with the Dolphins, or does he eventually make his way back to college football? Does Saban go to a rival of Alabama? Because wherever he went, he would have won. Does he? I have a theory that Nick Saban may have stayed in the NFL, waited it out, And if Texas came open, he would have taken Texas. And you want to talk about college football looking a lot different. So Rich Rodriguez, all I'm trying to say is he's the most important figure in the history of the sport. That's all I'm trying to say. Next up, and this is a fun one for me because I would gladly go down this road. Hey, quick timeout. Check and see if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you're not, I humbly ask that you click subscribe. It's free. It doesn't sign you up for anything. What it does is it helps us keep this show free so we can just do college football year-round. All right, back to the clip. What if the playoff never existed? What if we would have just always stuck with the BCS? What if it was always 1 versus 2? Well, the first victim is Ohio State because they don't make the title game in 2014 where they won the title. So that's one title not there. They also don't make the title game last year. So that's 2 titles. That's it, guys. Like, they've won 2 titles. In the playoff era, they wouldn't have won either one of them. So Ohio State is looking back to, like 2002 or whenever that was, as their last national championship. It'd be a different world for Ohio State. Bama-Clemson still would have been what it was. I mean, Bama-Clemson would have been the title game in 15, but it was anyway. 16, but it was anyway. 18, but it was anyway. The only difference here is Bama would have played Clemson instead of Ohio State in 2020. So again, Ohio State victimized. I think in the net it would have worked out about the same for Alabama. Like the 2017 game where they won the title, they wouldn't have been in, but they would have been in a title game in 14. And that's the year Ohio State eliminated them in the semifinal game. So I think it probably would have worked out the same for Bama. But Oregon could have been the biggest beneficiary here. Oregon would have gotten 2 shots at the national title. 2014, 2024, they would have gotten a couple of shots there. And who knows? Because in 2014, they still played for the national title, but they played Ohio State. Instead, they would have faced Alabama. Bama would have been favored. Who knows? Maybe Bama would have won, but as we saw, that was a vulnerable Alabama team. Not quite as vulnerable of an Ohio State team at the end. But also, if we look past just individual teams, if we never had the playoff and the BCS game was just 1 versus 2, do you think bowl opt-outs would have become as big a deal as they have? Because I look back and I think about the trajectory. Trajectory is not the word. I think about the decline of value placed on bowls, and it directly correlates with the advent of the college football playoff. Because you had the playoff, and then you had the who's in era, which was a very, very damaging marketing campaign, and then everyone focused on who's in the playoff. Every bit of oxygen in the sport was dedicated to who's in the playoff and playoff implications, and slowly but surely, you had the phrase meaningless game just work its way into the conversation, which became meaningless bowl game. And basically, any game that wasn't a playoff game was a meaningless bowl game. Again, kids didn't do that. Adults did it. So the adults started saying meaningless bowl game. The players listened and did exactly what you would do in a meaningless game. They said, why should I play in this game? And so then a lot of players started opting out. And now that's the norm. Would it have happened that way if we never expanded the playoff? I don't know. Also, here's another fun what if that I can't prove. If you're a believer that there are some people involved in college football right now that are only involved because they can profit in an obscene way off of college football due to the playoff, if we didn't have the playoff, if the big profit levers were never really pulled on college football, how many people would have just moved on and looked for the next thing they could destroy instead? How many people in college athletics right now would not be in college athletics because it wasn't profitable enough for them? It's a fun question.